introduce you to our speaker. So today's speaker is Cheryl Nealon. Cheryl Nealon owns and operates CMIT Solutions of Monroe, providing IT services to small and mid-sized businesses. Cheryl's focus is helping business owners make well-informed decisions on their technology and providing them a superior level of support. You know, the type of support you typically see reserved for larger organizations. But in short, she works to make technology productive for her clients and also so that they can focus on their own businesses, their main focus. Prior to owning CMIT Solutions, Cheryl spent over 20 years driving growth in highly competitive markets for large global corporations in the Rochester area, upstate. She holds an MBA from the Rochester Institute of Technology and a BS degree in marketing management with a computer science minor from the State University of New York at Geneseo. Now for today, we have a special for you because Cheryl's partner in crime in developing the webinar is technology evangelist and expert Evan Stein. Evan is the owner and operator of CMIT Solutions of Manhattan. Like Cheryl, Evan's business exists to help owners and their businesses achieve technology confidence, to make sure that they are invested in the right technologies for them and using it the best way that they possibly can. Evan holds an MBA from New York University and a Bachelor's of Engineering from the Cooper Union. So we're going to go ahead and begin with Cheryl. And remember, please stay on mute and she's going to take it away.
Hi everybody, and thank you Maniko, and welcome everybody to our webinar. So as Maniko said, use our chat. I love questions, and especially on a webinar that my voice just droning on and on can get a little dry. So please, anytime you have anything, any thoughts, feed them into the chat and we'll try to answer them as we go along. So, you know, last session, if you were on it, we talked quite a bit about the myths surrounding the cloud. Today, we're going to get a little more focused. We're going to get into the details of, okay, great, there's this cloud, there's lots of opportunities out there, but as a company, how do I evaluate those? I'm going to try to take you through some specific examples and give you an idea of what are the questions you need to ask and what might that actually look like. So, as we go through this, you need to know, whoops. Sorry. There we go. My slide did not change. But anyways, there's a lot of things that are factoring into your decisions on a cloud. You know, it's never an all or nothing. Well, every once in a while we have a client come to us and wants to move 100% to the cloud, and we can certainly help them along. And you can do that. But the question is, does it make sense for your business? And let's take it down a level to understand what things move and what might not want to, or what are some of the risks around that. And it really is different by every business, no matter what industry you're in. Some businesses work well moving most of their applications to the cloud, or just some, and others it's more of a challenge. You really need to think about your business strategy and your workflow. How do things happen today in your business? How might that be changing? That might drive more of a cloud focus. The who, what, where, when, how software is used, you know, what kind of software are you using, how's it being accessed, who's accessing it. Businesses, financial decisions. Are you more concerned about capital expenditures and minimizing those, or you've got some money in that bucket and you want to save some operational expense? The cloud can help you. Some solutions are more OpEx and more CapEx focused. The applications cloud version. So you have some tools that you're using today and you're using them in your office, on your desktop or on your server. Are there options for that particular application to move to the cloud, and can it even operate in that kind of a model? What are the interdependencies? Most of us have multiple applications we use, and some of them talk to each other. So making sure you understand, if you have applications that are talking to each other, what happens if you move some of those to the cloud? And of course, there's always security concerns. Biggest fear right now is the safety and security of your data. So, you know, the cloud can actually provide additional security levels that you might be able to find or afford in your office. So those are other concerns people think about. So really when the first step is to think about why you're even considering the cloud in the first place. The number one that I often hear is that, oh, I think I can save some money. I want to manage some costs. And in some cases that's true. In others, not so much. And it's really a business decision. You have to look at all of the costs involved and whether or not it's the right decision and going to provide the value that you're looking for. Enabling easy access from multiple locations, that's a big one. You've got either people working from home, or you've got satellite offices all over the country, or even road warriors working from all over the globe. A lot easier for them all to access it if everything's up in the internet, as long as they have internet access. So is that something that you're trying to drive towards? Improving security. Perhaps you've decided that the closet in your office is not as safe as you would like, and there's some opportunity to have a little bit better security on a cloud solution. Or, supporting multiple devices. No longer is the IT world nice and simple and everything runs on a PC and you're done. Today, most environments, at the very least, we've got people that have a few Macs in their office, on top of course, the PCs and the desktops and laptops. But oh, by the way, now we've got tablets and Apple tablets, Android tablets, Windows tablets. We've got phones, and people really want to be able to access the data and the applications they're using to do work from anywhere and any tool. And how do you do that? Is the cloud going to help you get there? Keeping up with the latest versions. It's a pain in the neck to have to upgrade every couple of years all your software. Maybe you'd rather be like always have the newest and greatest. I think of this a lot as the people that like to lease cars so they can have the new car every 3 years. Maybe you want to have the new software as it comes out and not have to wait until you can afford, the next upgrade line. Integrating with other tools, like I mentioned, all of our software tends to talk to each other. Office products, for example, pretty much everything else feeds in Office. Feeds Word or Excel, so they need to be able to talk, and maybe you've got other tools that you want to be able to leverage that that are online or on your phones, and how might that tie in? And then there's always a simple answer. It just seems like the right thing to do. Everybody's talking about it. I want to see how it might help my business, and that's a fine thought too. The important thing is, okay, this is what's getting us here. Now, how can we break this down to see if it's the right business decision for you? And really to do that, it's like I said before, it's not an all or nothing. It's not like one day we're going to wake up and move everything to the cloud and no longer have our servers, no longer have anything on our desktop. We're going to be looking at application by application, whether or not it makes sense for you and your business. Email applications, these are some of the things you should be thinking about. Email is probably the simplest. That's probably the first thing most people move to the cloud. Most of our clients do no longer have an on-premise Exchange server. It just doesn't make sense, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, especially for smaller businesses. But other ones to think about, accounting software. You've got your QuickBooks on your desktop or on your server today. Are you thinking it might make sense to move to the QuickBooks Online or some online version of accounting software? CRM, customer database software, maybe you're running something like ACT on your desktop today and you feel like you've kind of outgrown it, and thinking about moving something to the cloud so that your sales team can access it from wherever they are. That's a big one. Line of business applications, no matter what industry you're in, there are some of those. We use Autotask as an IT business. There are, accounting firms have all the tax software, ERP systems for manufacturing, electronic health records, management software for healthcare. Whatever it is, there are options on both sides, both to keep it in-house on a local server or to put it up in the cloud. So something you really should consider. Microsoft Office. If you haven't recently tried to buy an Office license and you go online, you might be surprised how hard it is to actually find the license cost to buy just a license of Office 2016 that you're going to keep as a perpetual license on your computer. It's there, you can find it, but the first stuff you're going to see is Office 365, the monthly fee to continue having the latest and greatest recurring revenue for Microsoft, and you always get the latest software. That's what Microsoft is pushing out. So that's obviously one that's quickly moving to the cloud from the business model that they pushed. And file storage and sharing, that's probably one of the ones we get the most prospects calling us about. You know, they're thinking about needing a better IT company or needing somebody that can really help manage their systems. And they say, you know, we've moved, everything else is in the cloud, our line of business applications in the cloud, our emails in the cloud. All we really got left is this little server holding, and we think it's just file storage and sharing. Can't we move that to the cloud? And that's certainly easy enough to do. There's lots of solutions out there that we can help them through. But then you see the next ones with the question marks. That tends to be the stumbling block, the domain controller. You can do that. You can move a domain controller to the cloud as well. As we talk, you'll see some comparisons in cost. It's not always the most cost effective. So that obviously generates new conversations as whether or not that's important to you as a business and how you're going to mitigate that if you really don't want a server at all in your office. So those are the types of accounting that you might think, or types of software you might think about. So now what I'm going to do is kind of walk you through the decision tree. It can get a little boring and slow, so I'll do my best to keep it interesting. Like I said, ask questions along the way if you have any, and Monika will let me know that there's a question in the chat. So the first question, so let's say you've decided that you want to consider your QuickBooks. You want to move your accounting software to the online version. The very first question that you might ask yourself is, does the vendor I'm using today have a cloud solution? Because if the vendor I use today, if Intuit is the manufacturer of QuickBooks, if Intuit has an online version, there's a few assumptions I can probably make that help me down the path of decision making. You know, one is probably pretty secure. I mean, if you think about it, Intuit as an example, I don't know when they started with QuickBooks, but it was years and years and years ago. They have the largest user base for business accounting software, right? They don't want to mess that up. The last thing they want in the world is for people to move to their online version and lose their data or have some really bad experience and they lose their user base for fear. So they're going to be really sure that whatever they put up online is secure and safe for their clients, right? You probably can bet on that. Anytime it's a trusted vendor that you're already used to using, that you've been using for years, they offer you a cloud version, it's probably pretty secure. They're probably also going to keep that software up to date. So as soon as QuickBooks 2018 comes out, guess who's first to get it? The online version is rolled out automatically, you have it. There's some level of support. If they're supporting you today, they're going to be supporting their online version as well. And I know this sounds stupid, but sometimes people don't really think about it. We are so used to the world where the internet is everywhere. So yes, you can pretty much access the software anywhere if you have internet. It still doesn't help you much if you're on an airplane, unless of course you want to pay for the Wi-Fi access on the plane. It doesn't help if your internet is down. But you know, so just be aware that if you do move to the cloud, there's that limitation there. So, okay, so your vendor has a cloud offering and now you're going to evaluate that one. So what kinds of questions are you going to think about? The first, and this one really surprises people. A lot of people think that if the same vendor has a on-premises version of their software and a cloud version, it must be exactly the same. It's not necessarily true. Sometimes it is. But if we take Intuit as an example, so like I said, they've had QuickBooks out, has been out for years and years and years. It's developed, it's a very mature product, and it's great as a desktop, right? And a few years ago, whenever Intuit decided that, well, wow, now people want their accounting software online, which of course was never a thought before, you know, the early 2000s, right? You never even thought of accounting software moving online. So now all of a sudden they have this legacy application that's awesome, that's well developed, but it was never designed to be online. So they have two choices. They can go spend a ton of development time and take a very long time to come to market with their own version of QuickBooks right from their development team, or they might find a company that has accounting software that's online that does a pretty good job and they're happy with it. Guess what? They did that. They found this company and they bought it. And so they bought an existing online tool to launch as QuickBooks Online. They prettied it up, made it look sort of like their brand, so you didn't really notice it was a completely different product, but the root of it was a completely different product. When it first came out, anybody that started with QuickBooks Desktop or Server and moved to the online version, it was miserable. We advised against it because it was too much of a change. They've shrank that gap a lot over the years, and at this point now it's a viable consideration. If you're a brand new company and you're just buying your first accounting software, either one is perfectly good. It really depends on which way you'd rather have it. Because you're never going to notice the little nuances of the things that are missing in the online version compared to the desktop version. But if you've been running the desktop for years, especially if you run like inventory modules and some of the other modules, you're going to see a difference. So you need to make sure you understand what those differences are. They may be very painful to you as an independent business, or some people decide it's not that big of a deal anymore and they make the switch. So that's a very decision specific to your business. If it seems like it's okay, you want to then understand what the migration is. What's that path? Usually if you're staying with the same vendor, they're going to have a pretty well documented migration path. They've done it before. They've done it for customers like you, and they understand what the gaps are, and you can have a very intelligent conversation and understand what risks you have when you do the migration, how much time it's going to take, what are the risks to your business in that process, are there additional costs. Make sure you understand those. Sometimes, not in QuickBooks, but in some software, especially line of business software, where there tends to be very large databases. Yeah, thank you. Very large databases of that are larger files. Sometimes the software vendor will recommend you host the database itself locally. Everything else is in the cloud, but from a speed and time to access that data, it's much better to be local where your core users are. So understand if that's the case. On the flip side, do you want to be able to access that on the airplane without having to pay for the internet service? There are some software products that have tools available to replicate it locally. So that might be an option so that you could actually do your books on the plane. And of course, understand what level of support's included. You're probably going to get something similar to what you had on the desktop version, but make sure you understand. Okay, so let's say you've gone through all that and you go, yeah, you know what, I think this is still for me. I think it's a good solution. It'll meet my needs. I can handle whatever setbacks there might be. So of course, then the question is, how much is this really going to cost me? And it is a different cost model when you move to the online versions from a traditional on-premises. One of the big differences, concurrent versus unique users. Typically, most applications, not all, but most applications that are on-premises, they count users by the number of people that might be using it at any one point in time. So if you have 4 people that access QuickBooks, but never more than 2 people at the same time, you can get by with just 2 licenses. Awesome. I've had manufacturing plants where they might have 30 users, but most of them are only using it for a few minutes a day, so they only need about 5 licenses because there's no duplication. Part-timers is another big example like that. But when you move to an online version, most often it's a per user price. Each user has to have a unique user sign-in. Maybe it's their email or something similar, but they all have to be unique and they're all counted. Even if they only use it 5 minutes a week, they count just as much as the person that uses it 40 hours. So understand what that looks like. And then of course it's recurring. So when you buy a on-premises software license, typically it's a perpetual license. You buy it and you can use it for as long as you want until you decide it's worth paying for the next upgrade. But that's not so true. With online, you have to keep paying. As soon as you stop paying, you no longer have access to the software. And with the per user model, they can get, the prices can escalate over time. So I figured I would do a cost comparison at this point. And since I've been talking about QuickBooks, we'll use that as a great example. So the QuickBooks Pro Traditional, this is the traditionally on-premises, you either put it on your server or you put it on your desktop. The way most people buy QuickBooks today, you buy that license, it is good forever. Yes, Intuit will stop supporting it in a few years, so I wouldn't really recommend using it forever, but I have accounting clients who have clients of theirs, and they'll tell me they have some clients that are still using like QuickBooks 2003. Okay, it still works. It's not secure. It obviously doesn't have most of the features and functionality of the newer versions, but it works just fine for their end clients, and so that is still out there. That is possible. I don't recommend it. We generally recommend most of our clients buy the new license every 2 to 3 years, depending on their business. Usually that's about when, you know, support ends after 3 to 4 years, so you want to make sure you have a supported license, and that kind of keeps you up with the latest and greatest new features and functionality that they, you know, launch every year. So you buy this perpetual license. Single license is $299.95, but they do have discounts if you buy more than one. So 2 users would be $549.95, but remember that's concurrent users again. So you might have 4 people accessing QuickBooks, but never more than 2 at a time. That $550 is going to cover those people. And and that you pay that once, and that $550 covers you for year 1, year 2, year 3, until whenever the point is you decide that you want to upgrade to the next version. On the contrast, you've got the online version, right? Now you're going to have that recurring cost. You're always going to be the latest version. So as soon as QuickBooks 2018 comes out, guess what? You got it. You don't have to make a decision to pay more for the next version. It's just going to be included in your package. But now you're going to pay per month for the users. Now, Intuit's kind of nice. They kind of recognize that model of most of their users. They have 1 or 2 power users, usually like the owner of the company and maybe the bookkeeper. But then there's a couple key managers that need to access QuickBooks every once in a while. They don't really want to punish you for that. So they kind of understand that multiple users might use it at the same time, but you're really only using the value of a couple licenses. So they actually say that $40 per month is good for up to 5 users. They're still unique users, so it really is 5 people. It's not, you know, 4 people plus 2 part-timers. It's 5 people. But so you pay $40 a month for those 5 people. If you were only going to use the software for a year, that'd be $480, right? So that actually beats the cost of the traditional model. But unless you plan on closing your business in a year, my guess is you're going to keep using QuickBooks. So if you use that for 2 years, you're up to $960, and that's assuming they didn't raise the prices. Generally speaking, they raise the price every year, so that could go higher. And obviously over 3 years, you're at over $1,400. So either you spent $550 and it lasted you for 3 years, or you spent $440 for the newest version online. Okay. Any questions yet? No? Quiet team? Quiet group? All right. All right, so we've just gone through whether or not your current vendor, that trusted vendor that you've been using for years, if they have a software application, you can just, that moves into an online version, you can just make that transition, and whether or not that works for you. We've gone through all the decisions points. Well, what if they don't? Or what if you said, well, I like the idea of moving QuickBooks online, but the online version that Intuit offers just doesn't work for me. Are you out of luck? No, you have a couple other options. You could look at third parties that do hosting. So there's a whole business model out there of companies that have figured out that there's a lot of people, for example, that would like the same version of QuickBooks that they have on their desktop today, but in an online model. They don't want to host it anymore locally. And so they've actually built a business out of that. They build the infrastructure once, and they essentially rent it out, so you get your licenses, but you're on their hosted servers, and they host the application for you. Many of the big applications like this, ACT is another one that does that, QuickBooks, etc. Or there's always the option that you decide to host your own server. So instead of having the server in your closet in your office, you put it in somebody else's building somewhere, a data center somewhere. So let me talk about those two. So first, evaluating a third party. Clearly, you have all the questions that we've already been going through, right? Those don't end. You still have to go through those and make sure you understand what it is that you have and want. But now you've got this other third party you've got to evaluate. You've got to make sure that whoever's going to be hosting your software for you and your data for you is stable and financially secure. The last thing you want to do is move all your critical data to this third party and then have them go out of business in a year. So you want to make sure they're stable and secure, and you want to make sure financially secure, but you also want to make sure their data center is secure, that it meets some of the you know, regulations, and certainly if you're in your healthcare, it's got to meet HIPAA regulations. If you're in finance, FINRA regulations, but it's protected no matter what kind of business that you're in. And I have a picture of a garage here for a reason. We actually came across this where we're calling on a prospective client who the story goes that they told their the boss said, we need to move to cloud. And the current IT provider said, well, we don't really have, you know, there's not good cloud tools for whatever you have. They probably went through some of those application questions. And the big boss kept saying, no, I don't want to see another server in my office. I want everything moved to the cloud. So this was this independent IT guy. He went, okay, if that's what he wants, that's what I'm going to give him. And he literally moved that guy's servers into his own garage. And he hosted the servers in the cloud, quote unquote. So yeah, the owner or the business owner, I guess, got what he wanted, but I don't think that's really what he wanted. So make sure it's a secure solution. And again, understand the support model. Now you've got a third party involved. Do you still get the call into it, if that's the case, or whoever the software vendor is? Are they going to recognize who you are, or your license is owned through this third party? If that's the case, then are they going to provide support? Make sure you understand that model. And then I'll call it the last option is is to host your own server in the cloud. There's a lot of hosting companies out there. We've all heard them: Amazon, Rackspace, Microsoft. Many local IT companies do co-location support, and they all make it sound really easy. They say things like, oh yeah, no, you just tell us what you need, we'll put our text on it, we'll build out exactly what's right for you, and voila, you'll be in the cloud. The reality is it's still your server. Whether that server is sitting in your building, in a closet, or underneath a desk, or wherever it is today, or it's sitting in somebody else's building. Maybe it's a state-of-the-art data center, I hope it is. But even if that's the case, you still need the expertise of someone that knows the applications that you're running, the software that you're running, maybe even your business at some level. You need them to set it up, you need them to manage it, you need them to maintain it, you need them to protect it. All the same things that you need them to do in your office, you need them to do wherever that server may sit. It just happens to be in somebody else's closet. So that brings us down to, so okay, great, still I don't have to look at it. What, you know, if that saves me some money, which is what most people seem to think it would do, you know, maybe that's still worth it. You know, that'd be kind of nice. So I thought I'd do another price comparison, cost comparison. In this case, I took the most basic server that there is. You know, it's a simple domain controller, file server, and print server. No other applications running on it. This is often what we walk into as a prospective new client says, hey, our line of business app already went to the cloud. We're not really doing much locally. I think, you know, can you just tell us where we can store our files for access via the cloud, and then we can get rid of our server, right? And we said, no, you know, let's talk about the other things it does, and here's just domain controller and print server are the other two key elements. But you can do this with a pretty low-end basic server. So if I was going to still want those three services locally, I would get on premises. I would do a hardware, and the licensing cost might cost you $5,000–6,000. Okay, so we'll put 6,000 in here. Still going to spend some labor. Spend about $5,000 worth of labor. So you're up to about $11,000 just to get the brand new server set up, migrate over the old stuff, that kind of stuff. And then you're still going to have to support it. So let's say on average about $250 a month to support a server, a basic server like this. So if you multiply all of that out over the course of 5 years, which is your average life of a server, you're looking at about $26,000. Okay, a good little bite of change, but not too bad. All right, so let's say we did the exact same thing, but instead of the server being here in my office, I'm going to move it to a colo place. There's a data center down the road, and we're just going to move it over there, and I don't have to look at the thing anymore. So what would that cost me? Exact same server. So well, now instead of buying a brand new server and buying and owning the infrastructure, I'm going to rent it, essentially. That same server would cost about $450 a month to rent. Okay, Good news is I can terminate usually at any time. Usually no long-term commitments on that. So if for some reason I think I'm shutting down my business in a year, this might be a nice option for me. Installation costs, okay, you save a little bit because you know the hardware itself is already installed. There's still the application software making the thing do what you want it to do costs. And that's about $4,000, so it would take a little bit off installation. Monthly support, for the same reason, it's a little less because the data center itself, co-location provider, is going to make sure the hardware works, but you still need to maintain the software and the applications and make sure it keeps running for you. So that's a couple $100. Okay, so now after 5 years, if you add all that up, you've spent $43,000. A lot more than the $26,000 you would have spent if you put it in your own office, right? Now there's a bunch of models that are kind of in between, where you kind of, this co-location means it's still your server and it's still dedicated to you, but there are models where you rent the time or you rent the space and you share the server with other people. It's still secure, but you're sharing it. Microsoft's Azure model is a good example. They actually let you pay based off of the amount of time you're accessing it. So if I were to take something like this, a simple example like this, you're probably talking initial hardware, you have licensing costs that you have to pay is $1,000. But to rent just the time you're using it is going to be about $270 a month. Same installation cost as a colo, same monthly support as a colo. But you can see now the total price comes in between, so $33,200. Still much more than having your on-premises, but a little bit easier to swallow. Okay, so some people go, okay, well now that I see the numbers, why would anybody want to ever host a server? It's just so much cheaper to put it right in your iOffice. And there are certainly many cases where it makes sense. And some of the most obvious are when your needs fluctuate a lot. So you have staff doubling in during your busy season, or you need 4 times as much bandwidth during the holiday season. You need to spin up some extra power. That's a very common one. Or you just have a short-term need. Software developers are very big on this. You know, they're testing out a new software, and they need a lot of computing power, and they can go up and down, you know, as their development cycles move along. So those totally make sense. You don't want to pay for all of that power that you're not using 90% of the time. So it's great to move that into the cloud. All right, so I've talked about, you know, you have your existing vendor and preferred software, and that vendor has an online version, or how else you might move that existing software into the cloud. But there's another option out there, and that's you're changing software packages altogether, right? So instead of QuickBooks, you decide you want to go with Peachtree Sage. A much more common one is probably you're using Actiday, which was great for you years ago as you started your business, as you began to grow, but you've kind of outgrown it and you're thinking about moving to something like Salesforce, because now your remote salespeople would have access to it and it's a little bit more powerful, and so maybe that's the right tool for you. And that's obviously a thought pattern you also want to go through. And then you go through all the same questions you go anytime you make a decision on an application, whether or not it's going to do what you want it to do. But the biggest thing I want you to think about here is the migration path. So any vendor that sells online software, they want your business, right? It's a sticky business. Once you start putting your data in with them, they've got you, you know, hopefully for life, right? So they love, Salesforce loves when they get an old ACT client and they move over, right? They like stealing their competitors' clients. And so they all, pretty much all, have a migration tool that helps you move your data from the old to the new. And they're all going to tell you it works really well. It's so simple. Don't worry about your data. It's all going to flow through perfectly. What I'm telling you is worry about it, because I've never seen it all flow through perfectly. You know, and sometimes it's all there, but the screen that used to pop up first thing when you pulled up a client, it was a critical piece of data for your business, and it was always on that first screen. Well, it's still in there, but it's on the, you have to drill in 4 screens before you get there. That's probably not going to meet your business needs, right? So or sometimes the data, plain and simple, isn't even there. There's no place for it to go from X to get to Y. Seen that a lot with EMR, electronic health records, medical records software. I actually have a client, this was before we brought them on as a client, that has 2 legacy EMR systems plus the one they're using today. So they've made 2 changes, very good decisions to make those changes to new software because it better met their needs, but they thought everything was going to migrate over simply, and it didn't. Most of it did, but there's still data in their first EMR system, and there's data in their second EMR system that is not in the newest one. And so they have to hold on to that data for about 7 years, right? What if a patient needs it? So they are running old servers just to keep that data in case they need to access it. So make sure you understand what moves over and what doesn't. And if it doesn't all move over, then what's your plan for that? Is it okay not to have that data? Do you have to have that data for a certain period of time? How are you going to be able to retain it and have access to whatever historical data you need? Monique, do we have a question?
Yeah.
I see a question.
Yeah, sorry, I was muted. Yep, we did have a question, and we got a response from Evan, but if you would like to address it to the whole audience.
Sure. So I see on hosted servers, does it remove the cost of backup and redundancy versus on-premises, and would those be additional costs? So yes and no. So it can, but you want to, it depends very much on the specific hosting plan. So those are questions you would want to ask as you go through that decision. You know, and then there's variances. So hosted services like Office 365, there is some data backup and recovery, but does it meet the level of speed that you want as a business to recover, and or do you want some redundancy built above that? So those are questions you should work with your IT provider and ask. Hosting a server at a data center usually does not include those extra pieces, and it's up to the company that's providing your IT services to provide that backup. Okay. All right. So I have one final example for you guys, and that is an email. Probably the most prevalent solution application that has been migrated to the cloud. And I'll say in my case, pretty much all of my clients have migrated. You know, smaller clients have migrated to email hosted. Why? Mostly because it just makes sense. It has the advantages of 99.9999% uptime. So if nothing else, when the big giant snowstorm and the big windstorms that Rochester had a couple weeks ago came by, all of my clients had access to their email, even if their offices were shut down because there was no power and there was no internet. You know, people could get email whether it was on their phones and they could still have cell service, or at their homes where they still had internet. And those people could at least run their business, that aspect of their business. So it makes it very easy. It's also very easy to access from multiple devices, the mobile devices, as well as your Macs and PCs. So then, of course, there's always the dollars and cents, and this is where I'll show why, especially if you're a smaller company, it's like the easiest decision we walk our clients through. So it's time to replace your on-premise Exchange server, the server that's hosting your email today. Okay, so if you're going to replace it with another Exchange server, you're going to just put a new server in. You're going to spend that same $10,000 we've been talking about for a new server, right, to get it set up and all the software loaded and everything on it. All right, but that server is going to be good for you for 5 years on average. Okay, but you know, for it to be good for 5 years, there's maintenance costs. You have to protect it and maintain it. So you can spend, you know, depending how heavily you use that server, is between $2,400 and $3,600 a year. There's no migration cost because you just went from the existing server to the new server. There's no monthly cost. If your users go up and down, your costs don't go up and down. But if you were to spread that out over time, so for 5 years, the life of the server, if you had 10 users, that's about $22,000 you spent over the 5 years for your email. But if you had 100 users, it's going to cost a little more, not a lot more, not proportionately more, because you really just need a little bit more licenses and a little bit more maintenance for the larger user base. So you're going to be looking at about 28,000 instead of the 22,000. So 22 to 28,000 across the 5 years. On the flip side, you move to a hosted exchange, something like Office 365 Business Essentials, which is Microsoft's version of just email. So this does not include the Office suite. Obviously, you don't have to buy anything up front. There's no infrastructure. There's no maintenance cost for that. You do have to migrate. You know, most companies do not want to have their users lose every piece of email that they ever had and lose their folders and contacts and calendar items and everything. So you're going to migrate the existing Exchange server over to Microsoft Office 365. It's usually $100 to $150 a user one-time cost. The cost per user is just $6 per month. So if you add this up and you still got just 10 users over 5 years, you haven't even spent $5,000. So you spent less than $5,000 compared to the $22,000 to have your own Exchange server. On the flip side, if you are a bigger company, if you have over 100 users, now you can see the numbers flip. You know, now you're talking about $46,000 because that $6 does not vary. It's a pretty fixed rate. So you can see the larger companies still have a decision financial to make. A lot of them are still doing it just because it makes sense with the benefits that you get from uptime. All right, so that is my thoughts and our sharing on the cloud computing and helping you go through the return on investments and the questions you ought to ask yourself. I'm wondering, are there any other questions at this point? Okay, I'm going to guess not. If there are, please fill in the chat, raise your hand. I'd love to take them. We do have, and Monique will close up in just a minute, but we do have a white paper. There's, in case you're wondering what I look like and what Evan looks like, there's our pictures. So we've been hosting this webinar and seminar series over the last few months, and will be throughout the rest of 2017. And so here's the schedule. You can see on the right-hand side are our past events, including this one. They've all been recorded and are all available on our website, so if you would like to see any of the past events. But our next event is actually a live one. So every few months we do a live version of this webinar, so we invite you to come join us for breakfast, both in New York City. Evan hosts the one in New York. I host the one in Rochester, and you can see here in Rochester it's May 23rd, and in New York City May 16th, and we'll be talking about outsourcing your IT, should you. So I invite you all to join us. You'll get invitations through the email, and with that, Monique, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. And thank you, everyone, for joining the webinar today. If there aren't any more questions, we'll end today's session. As a reminder, this presentation was recorded and it will be available on our websites. And for those of you who attended today's session, a survey will be sent out to you with the white paper. So please just take the 2 minutes to complete the survey. And as always, if you have any other questions or would like to schedule a follow-up call, then I'll be able to help you do that with Cheryl or Evan. So just let me know. Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your evening or morning, afternoon. Bye.